Utah's going to be a problem. And
Yes.
Caleb Lohner scored a touchdown. So
he's going to get a few, man.
He's going to get, he's a little interesting weapon. He scored a touchdown. The last one they scored was Caleb Lohner, a guy who's covered Caleb Lohner. Grayson Grundhoefer didn't cover him playing football, but Caleb Lohner scored a touchdown for Utah last night. Grayson, I would not have picked first game out of the box as a football player, him scoring a touchdown, but hey, you never know.
Well, I mean, it certainly helps when Utah's able to roll out the second string in the very beginning of the second half. I think they even brought him out at the very end of the first half. So, I mean, they were just rolling. And obviously when those type of things happen, that's how you get those kind of crazy moments. I mean, we saw it with Baylor at times, and I'm not saying it's the same thing, but when McGowan was catching those touchdowns and those games were blowouts, it sometimes can happen. But it was pretty cool to see Lohner come in and have an impact like that in his first game. I mean, pretty special stuff, honestly. And we always knew he was a really good athlete. It just didn't quite all come together on the basketball court.
Yeah. And he I mean, I think sometimes he played basketball like he was going to play, like he was playing football. Like he's, that lack of grace in basketball doesn't matter in football. Like you need that. Like you can be very graceful, but you're going to have to run into some people. And he's pretty good at that.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And you're completely right on what you just said. I mean, he looks like if you've ever been to an open gym or whatever, and you're playing with football guys and it's just everything is 110%, but then it's like, the landings are weird. The fouls are really hard. Just everything about it is just more physical and also just a lot less graceful than if you're just your typical basketball player. And I feel like Caleb kind of got into those situations. Obviously his physicality was very wanted at times, but then it was he'd run into someone and then he gets a foul, or trying to screen someone. It's almost like he's tackling them. Those type of things obviously, happen when you're more of a football guy than a basketball guy, even though clearly, I mean, he's pretty good at both.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Grayson, it's finally here. Baylor versus Tarleton. We've all made our picks on SicEm365.com. I should have maybe amended mine after we found out that Tarleton's not going to be, right from the horse's mouth from Todd Whitten, found out that the quarterback's not going to be playing this week. Now, I still thought Baylor was going to win by a lot. Now I think that probably goes up a little bit because of Tarleton probably won't be able to score with their backup in, theoretically, like they would with their starter. But this should be a good test, and I'll tell you what I'm watching for. Like I did with Kansas and Linwood, Colorado, the teams last night, against these teams that you're supposed to blow out, how do you blow them out? Do you struggle at all? And is there a weakness that even a team that you shouldn't have this weakness against can exploit?
I would definitely agree with that. And I mean, I think you can make it kind of simply looking at maybe, the numbers or, the weaknesses and things like that. I think for me, though, when it comes to these matchups, it's more about, are you winning up front? For me, because I think there are other things that you can maybe, explain away. So for instance, the UCF game last night, UCF just completely dominated that game in the trenches. And so I come away just going, okay, they're going to be able to run the football. Their defense looks a lot better. So their only question mark is, what's with KJ Jefferson? Is this guy going to be extremely erratic all year long? That's the only real takeaway, I think, from the game. But if Baylor had a performance like that, I think it would really calm a lot of nerves down, because what DeQuan Finn can do, what he's going to bring to the table. But if they're establishing physicality up front on both sides of the ball, meaning they're running the football, they're stopping the run, they're not allowing a lot of pressure, I think that is a great sign going forward, and something that obviously they need to address all offseason and tried to through the transfer portal and various additions and new coaches and everything along those lines. So if they can really establish that will give me more confidence going forward into the season. And the thing of it is they're going to get tested a lot in week 2, because what I saw from Utah immediately was their defensive line is really, really good. Now, I have questions about their run game, but their defensive line is going to be very hard for anyone to run against and honestly to throw against, because they do create a lot of pressure as well.
Yeah. Grayson, this is going to be our first look at DeQuan Finn. Legitimately, I know that you've seen some practices. We didn't have a spring game. We can go look at film in the MAC by the MAC Offensive Player of the Year from a year ago and see what he can do. But inside this offense with these players, this is the first time we're going to see him. I'm curious how much we see of the balance of throw to run with him in this game, because if Baylor can be successful offensive early, then they can maybe do like Jalen Daniels last night, where they can keep a lot of things, in the playbook for another week before they go play what is a Utah team that will be very, very, very tough to stop.
Right. And that's such an interesting question, I think, because a lot of it is game flow and what dictates you pulling the football and running it instead of handing the ball off. I watched a lot of the UCF game, so I keep bringing it up, but KJ Jefferson had to run like 11 or 12 times in that game. And then you look at, Cam Rising and you look at Jalen Daniels, and it was very clear that they were really trying to not run those guys at all. I'm curious. I actually think that Baylor's going to allow Finn to run it. I don't think it's going to be a lot of designed QB power type stuff, but I do think he's going to have the ability to keep it when he wants to. I personally think Baylor's coming into this game looking to make a statement. I do not think this is a game where they're just going to, hold things back and be, extremely vanilla. They will be some, they're going to keep some things, from film and not allow Utah to see it. But I think in general, this game is about Baylor. This game is about Baylor making a statement, getting the fans back on board, and really just creating, I think, confidence and establishing that mindset that they really need to get back to. And we've heard it all off season: edge, physicality, starting fast. I think this is a moment where they really need to prove that. And so for that reason, I think everything's going to be pretty open for Finn. I think he'll run it when he needs to. I think he'll probably make some plays with his legs. And then, hopefully we get to see him throwing the ball a little bit as well, because I think that's an area that we're all very intrigued by with these receivers.
Yeah, absolutely. Defensively, what do you expect to see more of now that Dave Aranda's calling it?
Right. I'm not really sure that it's going to be too much of a change up. I know that he wasn't calling plays, but it still was within his defensive scheme. And so I think you might see some more creativity. I think you're definitely going to see more packages, because Dave Aranda has mentioned that. So subbing guys in for various roles, bringing guys onto the field who fit a particular skill set. I think you'll see that. You're going to see a ton of blitzing from the second level. That's been a Dave Aranda staple. You go through his time at LSU, Wisconsin. There are some guys that had big sack seasons from the defensive line and from the edge spot, but not that many. A lot of it is guys from the second level, and that's why we've seen so much success from Jalen Petrie blitzing the quarterback, Terrell Bernard, even Matt Jones to a certain extent. So I think you'll see a lot of that. Guys like Kendrick Simpkins, Steve Linton getting into the backfield, Matt Jones, Keaton Thomas. I think you're going to see a lot of that blitzing from the second level, allowing guys to drop back in coverage, particularly those edge players. So they're going to try to create some havoc, create some mismatches, and hopefully, I think they're thinking they're going to try to get after the quarterback and force some turnovers, because those were two areas that they were just not good at last year.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got to get better at a lot of different things, Grayson. But you are an eternal optimist when it comes to this team. You are, and that's why we love you, because when we are in the dark days over here going, this is bad, you can kind of to bend us back into maybe some more positivity. You felt maybe a little bit more confused about this team last year going in than any year since I've known you. I think that was kind of the case for all of us, because we didn't know, based on how the year closed out and what was going to change and all these things. And it kind of went in nothing went right direction. This year, how do you feel compared to last year at the same time?
I think it's very different. Last year, it just was problems that even the staff just did not know that they had, which, it's not really excusable, but it's just something that simply did happen. I mean, they felt good about their offensive line. They felt good about their defensive line. And then you turn around and those two positions just were really, really bad last year. I mean, and to put it simply, and they didn't address things through the portal. They tried to rely on development. It didn't work out. And, in 2022, I will stand by this. That was a good football team. And I know they finished poorly, but I'm telling you, the West Virginia game, the TCU game, it's like a play in each of those games. If it goes the other way, that's 2 more wins on the schedule. There were other games like that. That team was pretty good. They went on the road, beat Oklahoma in Norman pretty bad. I mean, they were a solid football team. Last year's team was not. Last year's team was bad. They had so many problems. It started with the offensive line. That trickled down into the inability to run the football, the inability for Blake Shapen to make throws. I mean, because he didn't have time. And a big part of that is just, that's not his forte, avoiding sacks. That never has been something that he's been good at. So I think you fast forward to this year, they really tried to address all the problems that they had a year ago. They went into the transfer portal heavily, brought in 6 transfers on the offensive line, brought in a quarterback that is extremely mobile, but more than that is amazing at avoiding sacks. And what I mean by that is Sawyer Robertson and Blake Shapen were both in the mid 20% as far as pressures turning into sacks, whereas DeQuan Finn was under 9%. I mean, he is very good at that. And so I think they've really tried to address those things. They address the receiver position, bringing in a veteran like Ashton Hawkins, who's familiar with the offense. And then, of course, defensively, Dave Aranda taking over as defense coordinator. I mean, I think all of that, reshaping NIL, forming the roster differently, these things are very important and are reasons why I feel like you can be more optimistic. I will also say that in the history of the Big 12, though, in recent years, it is very easy for a team to be really bad one year and then really good the next year. It happens all the time. And so I think when people talk about, Baylor going from 3-9 to a 6-win team, that's not that big of a jump. And honestly, if everything hit right, if they win every close game, if other teams have quarterback injuries, you could see more than that. And I mean, we saw that with, TCU the year they made it to the college football playoff. They faced like every backup quarterback they could have played and ended up winning 12 games. Like, these things can happen. And so if you put together a good enough roster, if you have the parts necessary, and then luck goes your way in Big 12 play, you can have a very nice rebound season. And I'm expecting Baylor to rebound, not get into 8-9 wins, not winning the conference, but I do think they're going to get back to a bowl game because of the changes they made this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, like, looking at TCU, and not to downgrade their season, it was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. But when they played against Will Howard, that was they lost the game. He was the starter all year long. And JJ McCarthy was tough. That was a tough game, but they won it. And then when they played against Stetson Bennett, well, we don't have to get into the recounting the bloodbath, but yeah, it was a bit of a different thing than they had experienced all year long. So yeah, that's a really good point. And we don't know. And look, we know that after this week, the schedule is not easy for the rest of the way out. It's mostly Big 12 teams and a couple of others, but after that, there's only one other non-Big 12 game in the schedule, and it's Air Force in 2 weeks. And the rest of the schedule is Big 12 teams, even though next week is technically a non-con game. So they really need to build some momentum going into Rice-Eccles Stadium next week so that they walk in there at least with some confidence, because it's going to be hard to do anything you want to do against that Utah team, but it's going to be even harder to do it if you don't have the faith that you can if you're wonky against Tarleton.
Absolutely. They need to build the confidence this weekend. They need to have things go right. They need to see points on the board, need to see winning. I mean, winning is infectious, and they need that. And so if they can come out, start fast, have a great performance, I think that does bode well going into the Utah game. And I'll also be very clear about this. What happened last year was really tough, and there are a lot of teams that really took it to Baylor. One team that did not was Utah. And so I think Baylor probably feels like they should have won that game last year. I think most of us probably, if Sawyer Robertson doesn't get hurt, probably feel like they had a pretty good shot at winning that game. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to be scared about going into that matchup, but they have to have the confidence behind it and the good play behind it so that they feel good about kind of everything they did in the offseason that allows them to go back and look at that game and feel like, hey, we let one get away last year. Let's go try to take it to Utah in this second game of the year when both teams have, a lot of confidence about the start to the season.
Absolutely. Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com. Also, you can see his podcast every single day that he and Colt do with Baylor Plus. But please subscribe. Look, we've got the bundle going on right now with Baylor Plus and SicEm365.com. It's $17.99 a month, right?
Yeah, $17.99 a month. You get both Baylor Plus and you get a membership to SicEm 365 Premium. And we are just dealing out the content right now. We have so much good stuff, so many creative things in the works. Jack had an amazing video that he put out today. We have all kinds of really special things that are coming, and recruiting will continue to pick up. Football, obviously, getting to recap games with Travis and Sam is going to be a lot of fun. So a very great season coming up and a lot of fun for people on SicEm 365 Premium, and of course, Baylor Plus with all the kinds of inside access that you could possibly want.
Absolutely. Thank you, Grayson. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.
That's Grayson Grundhoefer, the Bearcast as well. I forgot about that one that he has with Craig Smoke on Tuesday. So all of that is there. So if you enjoy Grayson's content, there's plenty of it on SicEm365.com.